You should really subscribe to him if he's that good. You should. Go do it. Thanks, Chris. Retail. Let's do it. July. Where are things at? What are the notables, right? The hotables, whatever that may be. And again, I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't get them. I'm going to tell you why they're not right for you. I'm going to tell you why they don't belong in your collection. And always, if I'm wrong, it's okay. Go get them. Because, you know what? We're also going to be doing this with a little bit of convention side of things as well. Because that's going to be all the rage right alongside this week. Oh, this is hot from this convention. Oh, this is going to be hot at this. This was hot at San Diego Comic-Con. Oh, my promo, gosh. Is not what we're doing. Let's go. Don't buy it at retail. July version 2024. So, I mean, we have to talk about it right first. I've talked about it in many other videos. Slay the Spire is finally available for retail this month from Contention Games. Slay the freaking Spire. And the number one reason that you should not even consider getting this game is you can go play it for a fraction of the cost right now, elsewhere, on a computer, on a PC, on a Switch, whatever you prefer console-wise. Go play it there for literally a fraction. I'm not kidding, right? You know, it goes right now on Steam for $3.09 at the time of me filming this, up to, you know, potentially $15 if you're really getting expensive there, $24 if you're looking for elsewhere. But that is the general gist of things. Some pre-order physical editions, collector's editions, yeah. But the digital downloads you can get for $15, sometimes even as low as anywhere between $3 and $7, depending on what site and when you're looking at, right? And so when I'm looking at Slay the Spire and that's costing me $115 and you're going, well, Chris, the core premise and gameplay of this as a whole is pretty much the same, Chris. If you like Slay the Spire, the video game, you're going to love this. But guess what? You can play it multiplayer. Okay, you know, you're right. I can. And that's probably the only reason you should think about getting it, is that you can play this game now that is solo only on the console side of things with, you know, people around your table. Players in addition. But I'll also make the argument that, you know, that's a ton of freaking money difference, right? Is it 15 times more valuable, more worth it in that sense to you? And some of you are going to nod and agree and go, Chris, I want to have that multiplayer experience on the tabletop that I get from other cooperative games that video games can't replicate. It's worth it for me. And the other side of you are going, yeah, you know what? I have too many cooperative games that are enough overhead that, you know, I think people are going to play with me, but never actually are going to play with me in the first place, that I can't get played in addition to those, you know, whatever that may be, right? You don't have any of those. That's the issue, right? And that is the one thing that has held me off from pre-ordering. Again, I'm not talking about you, right? I'm always talking about me in this video. I never throw shade at anyone else. I only throw it, I pile it, I heap it upon myself, right? That's what happens. Because if I can't get those played, why do I need another one, right? Truth be told, right? I had it pre-ordered in my cart over on, I think it was Atomic Empire. Pre-ordered along with a couple of the Wandering Towers promos and a Wandering Towers playmat and maybe a Summoner Wars 2 expansion or two alongside. And I was like, and I couldn't do it. I said $115. You know, I need to sell some things first. I need to get, you know, 3 or 4 cubes of Calyx empty. And then, maybe, he says, as there are games lining the floor all around me that you can't see as well. So even, you know, that issue isn't going to go away. People love it for what it is. I still am very concerned because I see similar vibes in that sense of Euthia in the same way but different, right? And you're gonna look at this and go, he doesn't know what he's talking about, which is true if you're new to this video. But what I'm saying with the Euthia comparison here is not the gameplay. I'm not saying mechanically. I'm not saying anything like that. But I worry about games like this that are taking IPs, video games, and putting them on the table in front of me. I just ran into it with another one that's sitting right down there next to me in Far Cry that I just did a review video for, you know, filming this weekend. Same thing with Euthia. There are just so many tokens nowadays. You know, I've got 5 conditions here. They all have 7 tokens each. Then I've got the, you know, things that go on the mat, and the terrain, and then the modifiers, and then the money, and then the experience, and then I'm just going, oh my gosh, you know? I am not one of those, I would love more apps heavily incorporated into board games. But when we start having boxes that are this big because of the sheer amount of tokens, because you have to have 37 different status conditions, all with 5 different, you know, pieces, it just starts to, you know, wear away at me. And I just go, an app would be super easy to integrate with from that side of things. And then why would I not want to just have it all digital? And so you can see how that sort of bunny trail goes. And that's where my head goes with this. And again, I would probably love this game. I can't buy it new. I just can't. And this is the weird dichotomy as well, right? If you're like me and you're looking at the $100 pledge right now for the core-ish pledge for DC United at the time of me filming this, I have absolutely zero qualms about pushing the pledge button for that. But gosh, golly gee willikers, can I not do that $100 retail? And that's partially because, you know, once burned, twice shy sort of situation I've had with retail. I have horrible retail luck. I'm much better at crowdfunding, if that makes any sense whatsoever to you. It does not make sense up here. But that's my own internal bias and barrier. And I would make the argument with a lot of these hotnesses, this is probably one of the biggest hype games of the year. Again, I'll compare it to Root in a different way. Is it right for you? Not is it good? Not is it freaking great? But is it freaking good for you? Is it freaking great for you specifically? Okay, we've ranted on Slay the Spire enough. We should probably get onto another game from that aspect of things. One of my top games from 2023 is finally hitting retail. You shouldn't buy it. It's Nekojima, right? It's the cats on wires balancing on wires, right? It's Dexterity. You've got like little cats that you get to hang on wire strings that are connecting 2 areas that you roll a die to see which 2 areas you're placing it in. There's a whole bunch of little modifiers and modular expansion content to give you some tricks and twists along the way. It's freaking difficult. The ropes are probably just a hair too long in order to actually maximize it. And it just, you know, isn't going to work for a lot of people. My kids love it. My kids love it. Anytime they see it, they go, hey, can we play that? And so it's not going to change your mind dexterity-wise. If you're not a dexterity fan, this is probably going to aggravate you in all the ways that you hate dexterity in the first place, right? Because of those reasons I just mentioned. You can play it cooperatively, you can play it competitively. I mean, that's sort of like, it reminds me of a little bit of Animal Upon Animal. If you've never played Animal Upon Animal, the actual rules of that basic animal stacking on the middle of the table crocodile sort of situation are rather cutthroat, to be frank with you. And it makes the game very difficult. But if you're like me and you've I got to edit some phrasing there. If you've played kids' games alongside of them while they're growing up, you realize that sometimes you just build and you just play it not as rules written, right? Not the raw as the D&D players go. Whatever, screw it. You know what I'm saying. But that's the issue with Animal Upon Animal, and that's how I'd look at this too, is just have fun with it and do it the best you can, and that's the cooperative versus the actual, like, playing super hardcore, I'm going to beat you at a game night sort of thing, and that's not going to be for you, but it's also not going to change your mind in the first place with this one. So take that for what you will. Star Wars Unlimited, Shadows of the Galaxy. You shouldn't buy it. It's, out of stock in a lot of places. It's being jacked up on the secondary market. It's also increased the complexity creep as a whole of this game, which is both an absolute turn on and absolute and utter Tinder turn off at the same time. I think the balancing and the conceptualization and the creativity that they have shown with this game through one-ish wave, now going into the second one with the third one planned for later this year, is, to be frank with you, completely astonishing and impressive. At the same time, you've seen now the meta shift completely from what they thought it was going to be prior, during, and towards the end of the first wave, Sparks of Rebellion. And now you're seeing the exact same thing happen, where all of a sudden the deck rises are basically significantly shifting away from anything in, leader-wise, 1 for leaders and 2. And that begs the question, just like Magic the Gathering-ish, right? How much creep is there going to be? So when you have these leaders come out in Wave 3 in November, are you only going to be looking at those? And now, again, I'm not as high on the competitive scene right now, right? I'm not as in tune with that. And so maybe I'm wrong with this. But that is an issue with TCGs in general, because how else are they going to get you to hook and buy it, right? And you know what? On the flip side, they're vastly underprinting it. They were vastly out of Sparks of Rebellion for months. And they knew that the clamoring was going to be even more from the get-go on the second because of the first than they did on the first. And now they, again, sort of said, whoops, we didn't print enough again. You know what? $120 booster box of packs. Well, you know what? You can pay $150 or $180 or however much now, sometimes in the secondary market, which leaves a bad taste with people's mouths, and also eventually is going to cut people out that were looking to get into it in a non-competitive or slightly competitive manner. So take that for what you will. Don't buy it. It's an LCG, TCG sort of situation where you're never going to have enough. Some is too much, and you're never going to have enough in the same sense. So take that for what you will. Another one of my games of the year, potentially this year, Tricktakers from Portland Gaming Collective. Right, I did my review on it. I did it with a video combination of Faraway, and I said this is just a really fun game. Think Root, only think actually accessible. Boom! Just kidding. I say that as someone who owns Root right down there and has the app, and you know what? I say it in a lovingly bashing. If you can't handle the criticism, get out of the fryer heat. I don't know, whatever it is nowadays, but that's the sort of thing I'm looking at from that aspect of things and saying, you know, yeah, there's some asymmetry with the roles, the trick-taking powers that you're going to take on. And it's going to be accessible in every other way, but you're not only going to have to know yours, but you're going to have to know how to counteract other people's. And you have the 4 basic ones, and you have like 4 or 5 extra ones as well. And it just works. But it's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to change your mind on trick taking. If you want trick taking in general, you know, go with even just something simpler like the Crew. Go with something slightly adjacent like Scout. Go a completely different direction in Oriflamme, which has none trick taking whatsoever, right? But is card driven in all of those ways. So this one is going to be niche within a niche within a niche within a niche, right? But if you like it, I really like it. So that's why I'm strange, and that's why you should never take my recommendations of what to like, right? As I say on my review videos, don't buy this because I like it, because, boy, I don't want you ever coming back to me in the comment section, Chris, I bought this because you said it was good. No, I never want to have that happen. So, as always, like, ignore me and listen to smarter people, but at the same time, take this to heart and contradict myself in a video 2 or 3 times in a short manner. So we'll just leave it at there. Bullet, Paw, and Palette. Boom. Don't buy them. You have too much Bullet already if you're like me. Are you going to own all of Bullet? Yes. Bullet, you're not going to maximize out. Bullet game time length, especially competitively, is incredibly fast. But you're not going to utilize the solo, or you're not going to utilize the cooperative, or you're not going to utilize the competitive. And so you're going to buy content for, you know, multiple modes that you're never going to need. Also, you're not going to ever get the experience that you want out of these, because like a lot of asymmetric faction-based games, you're going to have to really get used to characters and get used to a meta ask of how to manipulate them the best in this real-time tile-laying, tile-pulling bag sort of mix-em-up situation. Take that, pass your tokens to the next player as you remove them from your own board situation. Right? It's fantastic. It's top 10 game of all time for me, but it's not for you. And it's not for, you know, people that love it, because again, you're never going to get those played, because you're going to find 1 or 2 that you absolutely love, and you're going to want to play that one every single time. And you're not going to go to a new one where you may or may not like it, or you may or may not go your way, because you care more about winning than actually having fun sometimes. And that's not you, but you know what I'm saying in theory, right? In theory. So again, there was not a ton of incentive from Level 99 Games to consider getting them on the crowdfunding campaign, in terms of if you're one of those where you need an actual reason to support them besides doing the indie publisher supporting side of things. But that's okay. And you can pick them up at retail or not because of those reasons too. And you haven't played, you know, Star enough or Orange enough in the first place. No, those are Bullet expansions that are already out, not me just naming random objects or items I'm thinking of or around the room. So then, you know what? Let's stay with this. Horrified World of Monsters, right? Horrified World of Monsters, the 3rd iteration of the Horrified genre in the cooperative pandemic sense. And with this one, right, coming out from Ravensburger again, you're 1 to 5 players going up against, you know, the monsters in the night. And cooperatively, you got a Sphinx, you've got a Yeti. I can't pronounce the other one, but also Cthulhu as well. Unique challenges or combinations. Multi-phase puzzle sharing and, you know, sort of a little bit of mixing and matching. The Greek Monsters one, the original, which is your ilk, right? It's a little bit like Pandemic, but again, I, truth be told, am not completely familiar, but on surface value, there doesn't appear to be a whole lot of reason to get this. Mild reviews that are out there say, yeah, I mean, if you love Horrified, get it. It's more mix and match and a couple new puzzles. It's nothing, well, groundbreaking. It's enjoyable, but it's not going to necessarily change your mind if you weren't a fan of the system in the first place, right? You know, again, it's more of maybe a Mythic Battles where you find your pantheon that you prefer and go with it from that aspects of things. So again, if you want to mix and match Marvel United style that I, you know, so truly love, and you want to do that, and they say Cthulhu is the greatest, newest puzzle of all of these so far, yeah, I mean, maybe it's more like a Clank Catacombs, where if you have the other Clanks, you know, Catacombs was kind of a little bit of a slap in the face, if you will, like, ah, crap. They just put out a better version of this in one box as opposed to, you know, scattered through 3, a base game with 2 expansions to make it what I want in the first place. And so now I have to buy that, and it's going to replace the other ones I have. And then how am I going to get rid of the other ones that I have in the first place? And I want, because I'm not going to play them anymore, and all that sort of jazz. And this might be that for you if you're looking into getting Horrified, and this might be a great place to start. But if you have the other two and you're looking at it going, oh, well, you know, it's not necessarily replacing. It's just kind of, you know, going this way with it, as opposed to like what we just said about the expansions with, you know, Star Wars Unlimited that make you want to or need to or feel like you need to buy them. This one you could maybe pass, because again, it's Pandemic with a number of actions, with a, you know, put out the fire phase system, the enemies go and you go, and back and forth until one of it finally gives. So it's not going to be dramatically different in that sense either. Okay, let's go back to the cooperative side of things, though, and let's go back to Weirdwood Manor. Weirdwood Manor, the rotating board, the crowdfunding coming to retail right now. It's a hard co-op, right? You're asymmetric characters, you're going up against one of 3 different monsters. It was pricey on crowdfunding. And so the big question, you know, from Grey Ridge Games was, what is that going to look like in the end? If I deluxeified it versus I retailed it, what's going to be the main difference? Am I going to be better off one way or the other? And truth be told, you might go about even with this one right now. The standard edition pledge on the crowdfunding campaign for this one was $60. And consequently, though, you know, the retail price, lowest at Board Game Oracle at the time of me filming this, is $68. So that's not insignificant from that standpoint. Now, the question is, are you going to get all the stretch goals with it in the first place? So if you are getting all the stretch goals, because none of the retail pages I've looked at so far really say one way or the other, if you are, then, well, then it's, you know, kind of actually looking halfway decent in crowdfunding, but retail might save you if you're going for the bundle of shipping. If you went deluxeified was going to cost you $85, and then it made a lot more sense value-wise to get it on crowdfunding rather than retail, one of the fewer nowadays that you could say that safely now looking back. But does it change your mind? It's, you know, it's a 1 to 2 hour. It's slightly heavier than a lot of the other cooperative games I played back in 2023. The unique theme, the unique mechanics, the growing challenges along the way, all of that stuff kind of made it a little bit more upkeep in terms of keeping track of your actions, updating the time tracks that you're going to be spinning around and utilizing, the accessing of the rooms as you're going before, as well as the performing of the explorative resource gathering actions as you're going along. Get your companions, all of that sort of stuff, right? Dealing with the monsters, upgrading your characters, all sorts of those issues. So that's the question, right? Do you really have space for another, as we were saying earlier, Slay the Spire-esque cooperative price-wise? But I'd make the argument that this is probably going to be a harder rule upkeep as well as overhead than Slay the Spire as well. So if you couldn't do Slay the Spire in that sense, yeah, this is going to cost you less money, but it's not going to cost you up less here or here. That's overhead. That's my signal for overhead, not that I'm just, you know, like pandering to space above my head that's empty, because it's, you know, knowledge-wise all seeping out and emptying in here. Anyway, what else is next? New version of Yokohama. Are you familiar with the Tasty Minstrel game that came out originally? It was one of Tasty Minstrel's games where they deluxified the freaking heck out of it, and probably the second most popular one. I'll make an argument behind, well, the now still often sought after but never reproduced Deluxe Orleans version with the Deluxe Yokohama. But now we've got an updated graphical version that may or may not tempt you. Do you care about graphics? And I see people going either way on it. The recent discussion online talking about Awakened Realms' next upcoming project, I believe now it announced for the September, second week of, thereof, if you will. If I'm going to speak out of order, Yoda I am. So do you care about these upgraded graphical I was gonna say older games. Yokohama's not an older game. Like Yokohama, I would guess, is what, like a 2016 game. So you look at that and you go, I understand why you're doing it, but one, maybe it should have not been done that way in the first place. Two, sort of like the Bezier situation where they're putting out like Castles of the Mad King Ludwig 5.0 or Queen Games when they're putting out the next different, slightly plastified version of Kingdom Builder, or Queen Games' Feldian collection, which just finished their, like, I don't know, like fourth different campaign for Hamburg and some of the classic first four Felds that they put on crowdfunding in the first place. And now we have like that many editions of them already. Like, do I really need this? No, because as far as I know, again, aesthetically, no different from Synapse games. And this one, I'm including it. They said August. I'm, seeing it in July as well, a couple places. But then we go back over to a completely different one. That's a little bit of a remake, but again, a little older, but coming back all new. And that's Quoridor. Are you familiar with Quoridor? I mean, what, 1997, I think, actually? Just a simple abstract game of lay down a wall or move your pawn piece, get your piece to the other side and win. And you block and rearrange and basically try and stall your opponent to whoever can get across first and do it the best, most efficient manner, right? It's actually surprisingly high ranked overall, 119th abstract and 1500 top Board Game Geek with, again, 6.7 ratings. That just goes to show you how volume of ratings sometimes matters more in these situations. But now we have a Pac Man version, right? Pac Man. And that's kind of cool, to be frank with you. Navigate the maze, or, gives you variants that are approaching of the original game in the first place. The only issue I have is that I think it's kind of expensive, right? It's not that cheap because you're getting a little bit more of a deluxified version as a whole that Hatchet is bringing us from that sense. So it looks really, really cool, but I would worry that aesthetically it's going to just be, well, a little bit over the top in terms of what they're bringing us in that sense. Unfortunately, the people that have rated it so far feel more like the latter because it's got a 6.3 rating with 40 ratings. So maybe the new mode isn't going to be as well widely received, but boy howdy, with these pictures, right? Doesn't that look cool? And if you have any nostalgia for it, which again, truth be told, like that was the only video game my dad ever played. So part of me just like wants to get it for him, just like for display purposes. But I don't know if he'd really appreciate that either. So either way, pass, because again, not necessarily improving on gameplay and playing off nostalgia, as we see more from crowdfunding recently in video game IPs. But now we're getting a little bit of that tie-in, even with the Pac-Mans and the He-Mans and those sorts of things. So again, just be aware. Speaking of nostalgia, though, let's stay with the nostalgia factor. The Mandalorian Adventures, Star Wars nostalgia factor, right? Star Wars factor in general, like we were just talking about with Shadows of the Galaxy. And again, this is one of those adventure-based, stylized campaign situation games from Unexpected Games with like your initiative and that sort of vibe where they went that route. And I just look at it and I go, oh, man, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do time stories. I can't do the escape room ones. I couldn't do any of those. And I look at this and I go, that's nice that it's Star Wars, but I have a hard enough time knowing that I can get that played, right? Linked scenario, campaignish, even if it's a cooperative sense in this case, that, comparatively, I think of it almost similarly to a legacy game. And I'm staring at Pandemic Legacy 1 on my Calyx behind the camera. And it's saying, okay, maps, missions, cooperate, enemies to defeat, unique 8 characters, unique decks of cards. It sounds more like Star Wars Villainous as a cooperative game with little missions. That's what it sounds like to me. Illustrated MacBook, creating iconic moments from season 1. And I just look at that and I go, well, there's also a hidden trader mechanism. Well, that's not necessarily what I want to hear, right? Those are not words that you want to hear. And so, one, I kind of want something new and fresh. I don't want to just recreate stories that I kind of know in that way with the board game side of things, right? And that's my issue with Star Wars sometimes in general. I would argue that yes, it's going to be more straightforward. Yes, it's going to be less complex. Yes, it's going to be easier to get to the table than say that. But is it going to give you what you're searching for with that in the first place? And again, same designer, and it's going to give you a similar product. But if you didn't like, say, the initiative, I'd make the argument that this is not going to change your mind either. Just like I said with Tricktakers, where Tricktakers is super niche, this is super niche. And how do you feel about those sorts of games, the adventure rooms, the escape rooms, those ilks, along same lines as Legacy, where you play them and you're done? I don't mind that, but I think a lot of people do because a lot of people have a lot of turnover. So if you only can get one or two of those played, well, not only then have you not completed the game, but then you also won't be able to resell it because those are basically unsellable unless they're still in shrink and completely unplayed. So you could be taking a larger hit from that on both ends of the fence, straddling the fence at the same time and getting screwed either way. So then we're talking about From the Moon from Hachette Games. Crafting workers, building your base, saving humanity in a 3.5 weight rating style space exploration game. Factions completing missions from the moon to help you survive elsewhere. 3 survival missions before Earth ends. So you got to contribute your own parts, but you got to get the most points too. I don't know, right? When I hear that description, right? When I read that from Board Game Geek, not Board Game Greek, as I said in the outtake, right? Had to edit that part out. That how many other games have we heard like that or similar ilk from that? You know, I reviewed one, Lunar Rush, last year in that sense. We just had How to Save a World, you know, just anything space-esque, right? You're getting this huge overlap. And I'd make the argument that reminds me more of, say, dungeon crawls, where you're going, okay, Chris, the latest dungeon crawl with miniatures is on crowdfunding. How does this one drastically differentiate beyond surface level the other ones that I already have, the other ones I've already pledged, or the other ones I'm already getting or owning, right? And sometimes you can look at them and you can say, okay, very clearly, this X, Y, and Z is what I'm doing. Other times, like this, I go, I don't have a clue what you're doing different. I don't have a clue. And if I don't have a clue, and I'm not feeling really strong, this is going to be something completely separate, unique, or different, and really win me over, guess what I can do? Pause. P for pause, T for timeout, just not get it. Like, is this the latest generic spacefaring game that you're not going to remember a year or two from now? Right? Hate to say it, but that sort of thematic incorporation is a dime a dozen, just like, well, the heavier worker placements and the miniature crawlers. So, no different in some ways, hopefully different in others, but until you know, just wait, man. Just freaking wait. Because there's nothing wrong with that in the first place. So there you go. That's July in a nutshell. A big nutshell. In a gigantic nutshell. As my 3-year-old says, right? We have to have our big happies and our little happies at the end of the day. And he used to give us some very good examples. But now lately he's been like, what's your little happy thing? You putting me to bed. What's your big happy thing? You putting me to sleep. And you're like, okay. But he's 3, so it's cute. And we had a birthday cake today, and he had frosting, and it was mixed. And so he had a big piece, a corner piece, and so he was just playing with the frosting, and he has just doing this with the frosting, and his hands were blue, and he was enjoying himself. And you know what? Where I'm going with this, completely tangential, is that you need to be able to have that much joy when you're talking about playing or having these games in the first place. And if that's not the case, again, maybe that's the whole point of this video, is to help you find that again, so that you're not just having ubiquitous amount of this instead. Boom shakalaka, he tied it all up together with a nice bow at the end. Oh boy, is he good at this without even any scripting. You should really subscribe to him if he's that good. You should. Go do it. Peace out. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day.